Hi, I'm Cynthia Asen. I help people invest in real estate. For 25 plus years, I've been involved in private equity real estate developments and acquiring revenue properties. I'm a dealing representative with Integrated Equities and an associate broker with eXp Realty. Today, I'm with Mike Stewart with Vancouver New Condos and Oakland Realty. A realtor since 2005, Mike has been in the Medallion Club, which is the top 10% of realtors in BC since 2007. Suffice to say, Mike is on top of the Vancouver marketplace, the Lower Mainland, and all across British Columbia. Thanks, Mike, for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you very much for having me. My pleasure.
I'm very interested in how you keep on top of the real estate market and all the trends.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I had a little bit about myself. So I have a team of realtors in sort of Greater Vancouver. So that's City of Vancouver and inner suburbs. And I think there's 9 of us. And then I've got a network of realtors that I work with across British Columbia. So we're in the Fraser Valley, Victoria, Nanaimo, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country, the Okanagan. And basically, I'm always talking to these realtors about what's happening in those markets. I'm also working with partners in the development industry, in the project market industry. So we focus heavily on new construction, pre-sales, pre-construction condos, townhouses, that sort of thing, new construction. And so I spend a lot of time, meeting with people on the phone, talking about new construction pre-sales with many different people all across the province, all across the region, all across the city, and I do that all the time. And then for me personally, I find markets to be absolutely fascinating, and I love markets. I love reading about markets. I love listening to podcasts about markets. So, I read The Economist. I love The Economist podcast. I like the Vancouver Real Estate podcast. There's all sorts of podcasts that I use to sort of keep me posted. So it's personal connections. It's connections with people that I work very closely with, and then connections with industry partners. And I'm just always, I sort of swim in a sea of property and new construction and new development. So that's sort of how I keep track of it.
Sounds like you're busy.
Very.
Great. I think about all of the emails that I receive from you, and it's quite impressive. You are definitely across the board. So what do you see today that's really impacting the market? Like what's happening inside the pre-sale world, but also just the real estate market? We've seen interest rates rise so quickly, and a lot of people are floating rates. What's happening in that market?
It's fascinating what's happening right now. So I look at, of course, what's going on in the real estate market locally and across the province, but I also like to zoom out and take more of a macro look. One of the big things that I'm focused on and looking at right now are immigration numbers. So immigration is a fantastic thing for this country, and it's what has made our country great. I'm a big fan of it. So prior to COVID-19, we had about 250 to 300,000 new people coming to Canada. And prior to COVID-19, we in British Columbia were not building enough houses for those people. So there's an interesting infographic from the Fraser Institute, and basically what they're saying, and I believe this to be true, is that we built more housing from 1970 to 1980 in total, more housing units in total in British Columbia than we built in the last decade. Now, in the last decade, we had far higher levels of population, far higher levels of population growth. So the issue that I see coming right now for the real estate market in British Columbia and across Canada is we have an absolute tsunami of new people coming. So, I was talking about 250 to 300,000 people before COVID coming. 2021, we had 1 million new people come to Canada. 2022, we had 1 million new people come to Canada. 2023 is shaping up to probably be around those same kind of numbers. Now, we're still not building enough housing in British Columbia for the 250 to 300,000 people that we had coming before. So what we're seeing right now in the market in the here and now is we've got elevated interest rates that we saw starting from early last year, but now what we're starting to see is basically the product of all this, I would argue, government negligence in terms of creating the conditions to build enough housing in this province. Yes. And so we have elevated interest rates. We have dramatically rising population. Like I seem to remember hearing that at the population increase we're getting right now, Canada's population will double in 26 years. but we're not building enough housing. So what we're running to right now is we've got elevated interest rates, we've got low supply, we have huge demand. So in my personal business, which is, past clients, sellers, and sellers who want to buy, we're seeing multiple offer situations. Like in the last 2 weeks, I've been involved in, I've written probably 10 to 12 offers. 4 of those were multiple offer situations, and we're talking about, sale prices that are 15%, sometimes 20% higher than the asking price. And so what we're dealing with right now is almost infinite demand for housing in British Columbia, housing in the Vancouver area, and totally constricted and politicized supply for the creation of new housing. And so what that means is if you own a property or if you're thinking about buying a property, you're going to do extremely well. Now, the downside is it's very, 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 very expensive for young people and very difficult for young people to get in on the housing market. And it's really unfair and it's totally wrong, but I totally and completely uncategorically lay the blame of that on city governments, provincial governments, and to a lesser extent, the provincial government for not creating the conditions we need to build the housing that we need.
Yeah, well, City of Vancouver just changed the bylaw to allow 4 dwellings on a single family lot. I wonder if that's going to change supply side.
I think it is. And I think, we've got a new mayor in the city of Vancouver, Ken Sim, which I'm a big fan of, and I think he's doing great things. But I think that we need to go farther with a supply side. I don't know if revolution is the right term, but we need to have major supply side reforms in order to increase the housing supply. And it can't just be a city of Vancouver thing. It has to be a regional thing. And so, you've got a lot of people in the political class, municipally, who are just not on board with building more housing, and it's what we need. So, but I think, increasing the amount of units in the city of Vancouver, that's fantastic. We should do more of that, right. But we need a lot more than just that.
I guess the thing that it brings to mind is really a segue into my next question is, so what kind of strategies do you deploy when you want to be in this competitive landscape for both sellers and buyers? Like,
good information in a timely manner is super, super important. So, one of the things we do, you mentioned, emails that you receive. We've got an email list of, I think, 75,000 people. And so with that email list, we're sending out new pre-sale, new pre-construction projects across the province. And we've got email lists for, all the places I mentioned. So Vancouver Island, Nanaimo, Victoria, Sea to Sky Country, the Okanagan, Sunshine Coast, City of Vancouver, all the inner suburbs, Fraser Valley, all the outer suburbs. So we have email lists for those, but we also send out the market stats every month, and we update those monthly so people can know what's happening in the market. But I think, the most important thing is to understand what the market is doing and where the market is going so that you can tailor your personal and individual custom strategy to what your goals are. Because everybody's different. Everybody has, different investment targets, different investment goals, or if it's an owner-occupier, they're looking for a specific property for themselves or their family or somebody who's close to them. So it really depends on the individual, but we base it on having really, really good information about what the market's doing and where the market's going, both from, the stats, which are very important, but also from, all my conversations that I have, every day. And again, we swim in a sea of information about the real estate market, and that's basically what I do. I don't really have any hobbies except that, so.
No hobbies. Come on, Mike. Well, you gotta have a few hobbies.
I do, but they're boring.
They're boring. Oh, okay. Well, now we know it's good that Mike has boring hobbies because he's well informed. So for the people listening to this, a pre-sale is a marketing strategy really for development that allows developers to sell a property before it's built. And Mike's involved heavily with a lot of developers. Obviously, you can see he's got a network of developers, but more importantly, agents that he can attract a lot of business. So that's why you have access, which is really important. And I think in the world of real estate, they call you a whale realtor. And that means you get priority and in terms of access to these projects. It's also good for buyers. So if you're a buyer, it sometimes allows you to lock in a price that's not going to be available by the time that project's developed. So there is a good strategy. So let's focus on pre-sales. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about what's happening in the pre-sale world today? Mm-hmm. Are there more developments coming on? It seems when the interest rates started rising, a lot of developments weren't proceeding,
Mhm.
which is going to cause a supply side constraint
Absolutely,
again.
100%, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting what's happening right now. You know, I've been doing this since 2005. When I started, there was a lot of development in downtown Vancouver and in the core of the city, and you know that basically has ended for basically because land prices have gone up so high. There's just not a lot of land left, and then you know with previous city governments, there hasn't really been the legislative infrastructure that we need in order to build housing in the downtown core. Um, what we're seeing now in terms of pre-sale pre-construction is we're seeing a lot of new development in the suburbs and the outer suburbs. So you know that's where they have the land, that's where they have governments that want development and are pro-development and actually take action to allow for development. So you're seeing a lot in Burnaby, Coquitlam, Langley, Surrey. You know, Tri-Cities is huge. Fraser Valley is big. You know, the Okanagan is big.
Yeah.
It's places where the community and local government want to see development and want to see growth in terms of housing and want to develop their communities. You're not seeing a lot of that in the city of Vancouver. There's very, very little in the city of Vancouver just because the legislative burden is so great. But the nice thing about a lot of these developments that are out in the suburbs and further out is you're often seeing rental rates in those suburban communities and
Right.
further out communities that are not much lower than that of Vancouver and the core of the city, but you're seeing significant discounts in price.
Right.
So you might see, you know, say your rents are 15% less in Surrey than they would be in parts of Vancouver. Your prices are 30, sometimes 40%
So
less.
it just makes more sense
It
for an
makes
investor.
way more
Yeah.
sense for an investor to
Yeah,
go out in the burbs.
exactly.
The things that I really like are anything on a SkyTrain. So there's been some good data about how investments along SkyTrains increase in value by about 15% faster than pre-sale condo investments away from SkyTrain. So I love anything on a SkyTrain. Concrete is good, but I do like wood frame. Yeah, it's all about getting in where the density is, where the young people who make money want to live. And so they want to live places where they can walk to services, they can walk to parks, they can walk to restaurants, they can walk to bars, and when there's lots of young, you know, aspirational people around them.
And there's been some amazing communities being built. Like they're all inclusive, they're funky, they're hip, they're neighborhoods, and like you say, they're walkable. Even though they might be in areas that, you know, 10 years ago we would have said never live there.
Totally.
So it is remarkable, and I do credit some very innovative developers that are, you know, listening to their audience and thinking
100%.
about what the future is going to be.
Mhm.
Remote working. I
Totally.
mean, people don't need, number one, to have a car. Number
Yep.
two, really don't need to go into the office that much
Totally.
anymore. A lot of industries are allowing their workers to be at home and in place to save money, time, and really encourage
Totally.
sort of that.
Yeah, the traditional model of husband, wife, three kids, dog named Spot, living in the suburbs. Dad gets in his car and drives to downtown and works, and then comes home and with dinner. That's done. That's over. You know what I mean? People don't really want to commute into downtown Vancouver if they don't have to. They'll work from home, or you're starting to see new commuter hubs like the Tri-Cities or downtown Surrey or Abbotsford or Chilliwack, where people go for their jobs and they live in condos near there. The idea basically is it's the idea of the new urbanism, where you have nodes of development throughout the region that are complete communities, so that people can live, work, and play in their same community. So they don't need a car, and so they don't need a car, so they don't need parking stalls. It reduces the environmental impact, greenhouse gas impact, blah 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 blah. So it's a really interesting development model, and our clients who have purchased in these developments and in these communities have done extremely well. And you know, it's basically for unfurnished rentals. It's you buy it as a pre-sale, you wait for it to complete, you get a professional property manager, you set it and you forget it. And in terms of what we're seeing in terms of rental rates are going up dramatically, and our clients have done extremely well. And it's a nice part of a well-diversified portfolio for the investors that we work with.
Right. So you look for places that offer employment opportunities,
Totally.
Communities, walkable, very
Totally.
walkable. And they transform. And
Totally.
you're saying if you really focus on infrastructure, hospitals, you know, SkyTrains, that access, you will do well as an investor by investing in that community.
100%.
And maybe pre-sales are a great way now to get your money involved. And we know, because they take a period of time to develop, by the time they're actually completed, the world could be completely different than it is today.
Yeah, it's basically an option on the future. You
Yeah.
put down a small percentage of money on the pre-sale, you lock in that price, and then any future gains are all yours. And you don't have to deal with depreciation. You don't have to deal with annoying tenants. You don't have to deal with anything. And then in a few years' time, you get a brand new property. Now, another thing too is you can sign those pre-sale contracts, which is to sell them. And that's something that we do and do a lot of. So for investors, there's all sorts of options in order to make money, create wealth, and set themselves up for retirement. So these are all things that we specialize in and can 100% support your clients with. Good. So yeah, and I'm available for questions, at any time.
Awesome, because I'm not the expert in these markets. You are.
You're very kind. Thank you.
The other, I guess, okay. Last question. Where is the best place to buy a pre-sale right now, in your opinion?
Oh, that's a good question. You know what? I would say Surrey. It's something I didn't think I'd ever say, quite frankly, because I'm like a total Vancouver snob, but Surrey is fantastic. There is so much infrastructure going in there. UBC is going in there. SFU is going in there. SkyTrain's there. Surrey is fascinating. If you look at the populations of the city of Vancouver and Surrey, Surrey is on track from a population perspective to get bigger than Vancouver, probably in the next 10 years. Okay, they have 4 times as much land. They have governments that want development. Yep. They are pro-development. And I wouldn't be surprised if in 50 years, Surrey becomes the main city of the Vancouver region. Right. You know what I mean?
Because it can grow.
It can grow. Vancouver can't grow. We've got a new city government, which is great, and they're doing great things, but there are limits to what they can do because everything's built out in Vancouver. Surrey, it's not. I really like Surrey. I really like Central Surrey, downtown Surrey. Great amenity, great parks, lots of jobs. It has everything that somebody could have for a great life, but also a great environment for investors. So I really like Surrey a lot.
There you go. So that is going to be a great way to finish the interview.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike, as always.
Thank you. Real pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Great insights.
Thank you.
And Surrey. Let's all go to Surrey.
Go Surrey. Thank you very much.